Hello, everyone, and welcome to the definitely Unfiltered Rise podcast because I no longer can do edits. So out goes the intro. Here I am, and still dealing with all of the things that have shut me down. So last we spoke, we were talking about the maternal line of Joseph Smith's heritage clear back. And kind of some of the historical stories or lore surrounding some of those lines, including the Plantagenet bloodline and a few other things that play into that. So it's a very fun little story. I don't, you can't. Lore is lore, right? It is what it is. We can't say that it's true. It seems kind of wild. We're talking about dragon bloodlines and, Plantagenets, and we do know they existed. But yeah, the rest of it is wildly up for speculation, right? And it's fun. So why not? This one, I thought I would start out with a little quote and then go from there. So, you understand who we are. We are the house of Israel, of the royal seed of the royal blood. And this is from Brigham Young himself, Journal of Discourses, Volume 2, page 266 through 71. You will find those there. As I cannot right now present, I'll try and figure that out soon. This is still quick and dirty, kind of. Not as quick, but yeah, I can't do edits. And so if I cough, I do have severe asthma. If, kids come down, I just can't do a whole lot about any of that right now. So I apologize in advance. I'm doing the best I can to get back to work here because, yeah, they have definitely kept me from my true calling. And that has just been diabolical. So we will still be finding out what exactly happened there. And that is underway legally. So, as for that, I'm not going to completely go into that anymore because I've handed that over to people that can take care of that better than me. I'm frustrated with it. So, I had to shell out the money to deal with that. So, we will figure that out later. From what I can see, however, A2 Brute. Just remember, heroes are not something we are supposed to have. And if anything in this journey has taught me that, it is this whole experience. So, yeah. So, speaking of heroes, let's go right into this old paternal story of a hero, so to say, of Niall of the Nine Hostages, or Naugalik, or Ui Neil. Okay, this is an old Celtic king story. They say he was called this as he was said to have taken many hostages, one from each of the clans, to ensure they would give him loyalty. Because if you have somebody very important that they have, you might just behave yourself, right? Raised as an orphan due to an affair with his mother. She was a slave, so to speak. They say the father took her and fell in love with her. As far as I can see, it was a consensual relationship, so nothing terrible there. And he had this affair with her, and the wife just was bananas about this. So she tried to make this lady carry in, I believe is how you say it, miscarry by going up and down and up and down and down this big hill. So they tried to get rid of him early on, basically. He Carrie Ann of Britain, by the way. I didn't say that part. Like I said, the old wives' tale came from that. She gave birth along the path, and he was found, much like Moses in the basket kind of thing. So he was raised and then went back to claim his heritage. And he did that. Again, the stepmother was not great with this, but also this culture was communistic and very polygamist, and so I don't know what her deal was with that, but I mean, she knew what she signed up for. This Irish king, like I said, was said to be also immune to magic and sorcery. So that's pretty interesting. He comes from the Milesian line, and like the same Melusine. So, just so people know, we talked about Melusine last time. All the kings of Ireland were said to be from this line, from this high king. So, he was actually set on fire. This is why they say that he is immune to fire, much like the salamander, right? Um, anyways, they say that his brother was kind of a jerk, his stepbrother, and set him on fire, and he was fine, and he just like put it out, no big deal. So there is also another old wives' tale that says once he got reunited with his family, that he was out hunting in the woods with his half brothers and stepbrothers and came upon a haggard witch at a well. She said if he kissed her, she would become a beautiful woman. And he full on embraced, gave her a solid smacker. And without hesitation, when the brothers all refused, because I guess this witch was like a situation, she didn't have hardly any teeth left, like she was pretty, and he just didn't care. So he laid it on her. And she became a radiant woman and goddess of the land, representing the Flaties, Flaiteas, which I'm pretty sure might relate back to fairies. I mean, there's Tuatha De Danann and all this and all kinds of things. So, anyway, she granted Nihilek, or Nile of the Nine, and his descendants the divine right to rule. Now, where have we heard that before, right? The divine right to rule is something that the Mormon church really gets into. And so we're gonna touch on that here in a minute. Much like that quote that I gave at the very beginning. So he lived and reigned well in the polygamous society, having many wives and concubines. They say he had up to 12 or even 18 sons. So now 8% of all Irishmen worldwide carry this Y marker tracing back to the Nile of the Nine and his sons. And how do we know this? Well, there's this guy named Hugo Prego, and he's, a really flaming Mormon. Haha, JK. And he did the 2006 Trinity College Dublin study, and this was all like actual real. He said, all these guys would have this Y, because your Y paternal line is always going to carry through because you only get one. And it said that a whole bunch of the people had this here, so that it links directly back. They give optical illusions with your melanin causing blue eyes, which, light hair, light skin, and all of this. And this old wives' tale, falls into, real DNA, and let alone, we've got other old wives' tales included in it, which is Tia Tephi, or Skoda, okay, and her legend. And if you guys aren't familiar with that, but this goes into British Israelism, this goes into a whole bunch of different, DNA genetic studies that they've done concerning this, where they say that Tia Tephi, the daughter of King Zedekiah and Judah, came to Ireland due to, and eventually Scotland. But anyway, she was smuggled out of Jerusalem with the Leah Fail, the secret stone of destiny. And she goes on to marry Eochu, Eochu. Okay, so they're saying that this is real, and the thing about it is some of these early DNA studies. Now, I'm looking into Robert Seffer's work, I'm looking into a bunch of different people's stuff. So when I say I'm presenting things that are well backed up, sure, but I didn't do that research. Like, I have to go off of what's out there, and so that's what exactly I did. But this has had real DNA implications, and they say that there are more carrying this actual gene of Akhenaten, which was Tia Tephi was one of his daughters, in Britain and Ireland and Scotland than there are in Egypt. So do I know the answer? Did I go down and do the scientific no, I don't know. Okay. I am just going off of what I see. There were news clips. This is early on. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. How would you know? And so all I can tell you is it has been well studied. Hugo Perego is the one you can look up. He went to BYU. So does he have, a little bit of whatever eggs in the game? Sure. He's probably paid by the church. Like, I mean, and let alone, there's Robert Seffer, but he's very British Israelite. So not him, but his studies. So I'm just saying, like, yeah, we can always find a flaw in whatever we're trying to figure out, but I have to present it the way I've found it in books and research, and that's what I'm going to do. So, anyway, I will tell you as far as, and people are going to hate this, as far as the Mormon church goes, the old Mormon church, okay, this is like Joseph's time. I mean, literally, he died for this. So he said, he was a literal Israelite blood. Okay. Not by spiritual adoption. This is Archibald Bennett's one royal line, the Davidic lineage, or better known as the Grail bloodline, right? It also is known as the Desposini or the Mamadot of Mary Magdalene. And, you can find some of this stuff if you look hard enough, where Joseph, especially the Mount Follett sermon. I mean, we went over that last time. He literally said, uh, I swear to you, brothers, if I could tell you who I was, I would, but you would say it was heresy. I mean, that's not word for word, but literally. So, I mean, when we're looking at this stuff, we have to go, okay, weird, And we already know the whole pilgrim story is strange. If you guys missed my show, and if I could do interviews right now, I so would with David Livingstone again. He just is a wealth of information. His books, Order Ab Chao, fantastic. Hitting it out of the park with that. Peter Levenda does a really good job too with his book on like pilgrims in America. I can't remember what it's called right now. But these books were critical in all of this. So this has been like a whole months and months and months of study for me. There's probably at least 20 different sources, but of course they're all books written by people, and people can lie. I mean, I'm not saying it's true. But as for this next part, I can tell you, we're going to get into some things that are true and some things that the church has tried to hide, quite frankly. And, I hate it when they do that, because then I'm your bad ex-girlfriend, right? And I'm going to tell the truth because I think the truth is important. And no matter how wild it can get, or maybe you're trying to throw out the baby with the bathwater, basically, I still think there's a lot of good in these stories. And I think that they deserve to come out because for years and years and years, nobody said anything about him being Irish. Nobody said anything about Joseph Smith coming from anywhere. They just say, oh, his first, person ever to come here was Robert Smith, and we don't know what happened, and that's all. And then they'll start doing this weird thing where they're like, but there was all these Robert Smiths, and there was this Robert Smith, and and they try to confuse you. But here's the thing. There's court records, okay? This guy's pretty well documented. He's been in court multiple times. And so I don't know what they're doing there, but there are literal court documented sources for this one. So we're going to move forward onto that. The fun little story, there's going to be another one, but the lore is different than the facts. And I'll tell you guys when I have one or the other. The lore is what I told you about his heritage and him being of high Irish kings, right? Because it's important when we look at that Davidic line because it fits right in there. And if he is of the Nile of the Nine with the M, it's the M222 gene. It's M22 2 RIB M222. If he is this direct descendant from this king, if he is, and maybe he is, I don't know, I wasn't there. Then we've got an issue here. Then he was right all along, and he was what? I'm not saying a pure Ephraimite. I'm not saying he was the son of Mary Magdalene somehow, like down the line, grandson, whatever, the posterity. But I am saying like some of this is true, right? And so just like any great story, like I'm sure Melusine's bloodline of the dragons, I mean, I wasn't there, but if she did turn into a dragon and fly away, cool. But highly likely, probably not, but whatever. I mean, it's their story, not mine. So long story short, we're going to move on to the next piece of the puzzle with the very first person we can find that came to America and that was on the paternal line of the Smith ancestry. And he came on the ship Planter, Planter, in 1638. His name is Robert Smith. All right. And some people say he had a brother. Some people say he didn't have a brother. Some people say, no, he never said that. I mean, it's all over the place. There are stories that he had a twin brother that died at birth, or there is story number 2. He had a brother that was slightly older than him and came with him on this ship and just took off, and like nobody ever saw or heard from him again, which is Strange. This kid was either 12 or 14. I highly lean toward 12 just because of the court documents. But he came here as an indentured servant, and he came originally with John Whittingham or Whittington. That's what they say, but I'm pretty sure it's Whittingham. And he was to be here and be sold in the New World. So it was basically John goes over, buys a bunch of kids or whoever wants to come, indentured servants them, and then sells off their contracts. So he's kind of a middleman, like a broker. Child broker, where have we heard that before? But anyway, yeah, not for the reasons back then. And it was quite better than slavery, we'll get into. I mean, it was bad as far as some things, but other things ended up really well for Robert Smith. And so we're going to talk about that. And anyway, he did not intend to keep all the boys, so he did sell off his rest of his investment with him. So you have to work until you're age 21, and these people can come and buy them. Well, he was sold off to this family, and I couldn't figure out, like, why are they hiding this family? Like, they're, affluent, they help him become somebody, like all of this stuff. And then I found it. And so we're going to get to it. But yeah, I see now. I still don't think it's worth throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but whatever. They can choose what they want. So long story short, he ends up with the Tuttle family. This is John and Joan Tuttle. Okay. And Joan, she is a major gateway ancestor. Okay. She was a direct descendant through marriage to her first husband, who is Thomas Lawrence. Now remember that name because we're going to talk about that in a minute. Thomas Lawrence, with whom she had 5 children. Okay. Her nephew through this union was Sir Henry Lawrence, president of Oliver Cromwell's Council of the State, as well as Charlemagne's ancestry. So, I mean, this is somebody that they're definitely keeping track of. When I say these things, that they are keeping track, like they're literally watching the lines and recording them specifically. And it's very important because they're in line for kings and queens. So they have to. I mean, it's not like you're just going to have them come here and they don't care. That's not going to happen. So even though they say that. So anyway, her father was an incredibly wealthy draper and a cloth merchant. He was the mayor's freeman of the Company of the Mercers. So, I mean, this guy, her dad, he was a big deal. And his name was Walter Antrobus. Okay. And all of this is highly documented. I'll give you the source at the end. I'll tell you when it's not. This part, I thought, was a little interesting. This is documented, but it does not show a connection. At the very same time, her father, Walter Antrobus, was at the height of his, he's doing this cloth merchanting. I started thinking about it. I was like, I'll be damned if I think Mr. D's daddy-o was the same thing. And he was. I remembered that. Roland D was a royal cloth merchant. And so I started thinking, like, I wonder if these two traveled in the same circles. Well, let's talk about it. So this is just my speculation on if they ever met, but there's proof of time frames and what they were doing. So Sir Robert Cecil, a close friend of John Dee's, was a frequent visitor, and they were all in the same circles, and his name was very close to the families. So that was interesting. Dee's father was in the same prominent group as the worshipful Company of Mercers. And her next husband, Captain John Tuttle, was also in the Merciful Company. So, of Mercers. And so, Worshipful Company of Mercers. That's hard to say. I don't know. Anyway, her next husband we're gonna talk about in a minute, but we're gonna finish up with this first guy very first because his story gets weird. I think this is why they're hiding it. And I get it. I mean, yeah. I understand that they wouldn't have wanted this specifically out there. And eventually I will get like a teleprompter or whatever. But for right now, I'm kind of broke because they ruined me. But anyway, so I start looking into this and I'm thinking that there is something here because I don't understand what's the big deal. Okay, he's an indentured servant. So what? Well, all right. So we got a problem with how this husband dies, right? She becomes a widow, obviously. And I'm going to tell you guys this little story. And don't forget his name. All right. His name is Mr. Lawrence. All right. Now we're going to talk about something called the Ipswich Witch. I want to talk about hard to say. So the Ipswich Witch, Mary Lakeland, was known as this. She confessed, and this is literally in the Salem witchcraft trial stuff. You guys can go check it out. Very interesting and well documented. Oh, sorry, maybe not Salem. In the Ipswich, Suffolk East Anglican records. So this is her story, not mine. I get why it was a problem now. So she was confessed to having made a pact with the devil, okay, keeping familiars or imps, all right, and causing death and harm through witchcraft to others. Her story included the death of one Mrs. Jennings and a child of Mr. Lawrence, as well as Mr. Lawrence himself, who was apparently killed by witchcraft. Hello, this is the Tuttles first. Okay, this is Joan's husband. Yep. She spoke of her imps that they sucked blood from a wound in her hand made by the devil himself. Her case is well documented. And again, you can find that information by the Suffolk East Anglican Witch Hunt. All right. There is no documented exact evidence of the real death of Mr. Lawrence. However, they subsequently think that maybe he had food poisoning. So yeah, we hope so. And she was burned at the stake on 9/9/1645. So why is this story important, right? We're going to talk about all the reasons why. But number one, Joan ends up raising Robert. Robert becomes very close with Joan, and it just gets super weird. So yeah, you can't choose your family, and you can't, certainly as an indentured servant, you can't choose your family at all, right? I mean, let's get real. So, but nevertheless, it gets weird. I don't know what else to do with it. So, yeah. So let's get back to Joan, Mrs. Tuttle. Mrs. Tuttle ends up getting married to John Tuttle, and he ends up leaving very quickly after they acquire Robert. Okay. And he goes to Ireland. He's fleeing, they say. Listen, I don't know, but this is legally documented up the ass. Okay. I'm telling you guys, this is all over court documents because this lady was no joke, and she was almost damn near an attorney back then. Okay. She was a master of this time. By the way, for indentured servants, had to educate via the contract his servants in basic literacy, art, and mysteries, merchant math, and in addition, trade secrets. All right, sounds cool. The merchant tailors is what they were, this family. And, John he's Privy Council, House of Lords. He's an executive agent on the board for Massachusetts Bay Colony and East India Trading Company. He is the representative to the General Court of Massachusetts and member of High Parish Vestry. Also, by the way, this part's fun. He was Cromwell. Yeah, Oliver Cromwell. He was his financial, basically collector. I think there's another word for it in here, but he goes to Ireland to be this. Okay. He's in Ireland, and he's the receiver of the revenue. That's what they call him. Okay. And he worked closely with Sir George Downing. Yeah. If you know history, you're like, wait, what is going on? This guy just is all this important things, and then he just takes off. Okay. Sounds cool. I don't know. Anyway, Tuttle was Cromwell's receiver of the revenants. And like I said, he's working with this spy master, Sir George Downing. So you guys can check that out. Internet Archives, historical notices of Belfast on 9/4/2016, as well as preserved letters and court documents of the time, including Joan Tuttle, which you can look up. And so underneath Joan or John Tuttle. So this gets weird. First of all, this guy's super important, takes off to the very place where Joseph Smith is supposedly from. and important from, off to Ireland. And, probably no correlation with, Niall of the Nine at all, or maybe he told him a story. I don't know. I think it's very weird that some little poor indentured kid that doesn't have any parents and never said anything about who his parents were. And I'm sorry, at 12 or 14, you damn well know who your parents are. Hid his coat of arms, never said a word about it, and never talked about it in America. That seems really sus. All right. Like, he never once said, like, I miss my mom and her name was whatever. Like, weird. All right, whatever. Then he ends up with these trader guilds and these mercers and merchant tailors, and they're highly protective societies back then. This isn't just like, yes, I sew for a living. These people, like the merchant tailors, they would have like holy tents, and they had like all these coat of arms for what they did, and they used the scale and lions for that, and they used to use the crowned virgin, and they had strict handshakes. Where have we heard that before? When they were traveling abroad. And so, yeah, I just, I don't know. I'm not saying they were up to anything nefarious, and surely this is before Freemasonry as we know it, but there's primitive masonry, and there's all these masters guilds, and we've got all these different secret societies. That if you want to look up one, there's oh, okay, the dragon one, the dragon court, right? Or the garter one, or whatever. There's all these things. So you can't tell me that these people don't have a thing, because they were obviously super important back then. I tried to find it. The only thing it would say is this Mercer Guild. Okay. And I mean, that's fine, whatever. But long story short, John takes off, seems to be with a spy. I don't know what he's doing. He's working for Oliver Cromwell, and he never comes home. Not ever. And she ends up uh, going out to meet him eventually, but we'll get there. And so, in the midst of all this was a planned situation, because he gives full power of attorney to her. And back then, like, women were not what this lady was, and this lady was no shrinking violet. She was like, "Bitch, please hold my beer." Yeah, she was taking people to court. She was doing all kinds of stuff, okay? And that's why we have a legal account of Robert, because at some point, okay, they say that Joan really leaned on Robert, and she showed him a trade. It was extensive. Her dad's in with the John D. Royal Courts, and he's like a tailor and whatever. And then her husband's doing tradings of cloths. And so, of course, Robert is going to be a tailor, and he does. And it's well documented. All right. But in 1659, there's a court deposition where Robert stood in defense for Joan. And it's well documented, okay? This early puritanical stuff going on back then, it was all well documented. Like, think of back in the day when people would get married and they're like, "Oh, this is this," and they're getting married. "Oh, they're going to college." Like, they used to kind of announce everything, all right? And so definitely court stuff was announced. Let's be realistic here. So these issues that Miss Joan was having is because Sir John takes off, leaves her kind of in the lurch. Her family's pretty wealthy, and she's very well educated. She is very well served for this whole situation. All right. But this whole thing with Robert, I guess her son, like Simon, wasn't really about it because he was jealous of him. I don't know what's happening there, but I do know this. First of all, we got her husband dropped dead from a witch. Second of all, we got another one. So this family, and the reason why they're so in and out of court all the time, is they apparently were cursed. They were. Yeah. One of their daughters was arrested for lewd and unruly behavior called sinful dalliance. Okay. And all, as far as I could see, what she did was she was kissing some sailor on a bench, like, meh, whatever. And she wouldn't apologize for it. She wasn't sorry. And girl, go. Yeah, you go, girl. Whatever. I don't care about that. Also, there was some adultery thing with one of the brothers or sisters, and then it gets worse. Then the brother Benjamin Tuttle, y'all can look this up, was an axe murderer. Okay. This gets he kills his sister. And not only that, but another sister, Mercy Tuttle, I think it's Tuttle. It may have been a married name. I didn't look that part up. Mercy. She kills her baby. And then so she completely goes bonkers and has to be committed. They say violence has plagued this family and financial problems as well. So, okay, we got drop dead witch guy. We got apparently some girl that's a floozy because she's kissing a sailor on a bench, whatever. Sinful dalliance, okay, and adultery, and then the axe murders are bad, and the baby killing. That's just so. Part of me was like, was it her first baby? Oh, we'll get to that later. All right. We're not going to talk about the Church of the Firstborn today. All right. You guys can look that up. That'll come. Anyways, so eventually Robert gets to get out of this circle of hell. But when he's released of service, he stayed until he was 21 at least. He was still very devoted to this Tuttle family. And he actually left with a prominent trade, his freedom, his servant dues, because they have to pay them when they release them. And apparently this was some badass money, because it wasn't, but it was for him, because I'm pretty sure maybe court. I mean, doesn't take a genius, right? He was able to buy 208 acres of land. Hello, right away. That's a lot. Okay. Back then, now you're rich. He's rich and he's a tailor. So he died with 300 acres. So he just kept doing real estate. Hey, it's smart. I get it. It's fine. And he also went forth and founded on paper a town. Now, don't tell me, church, that you can't find Robert Smith of Boxford, because you could, because I did, and it's all over the court records. So let's be realistic. He became known as Robert of Boxford because he petitioned the courts to separate from the other parts of the colony and become their own town formation. He wasn't the one that founded the town, but he incorporated it. So he also, like I said, got the cool fancy name Robert of Boxford after that. He is able to bestow upon his first son, Samuel the First, the title of, well, I think it's his first, but anyway, Samuel definitely gets the title. I'm not sure 100% if he's the oldest, because no, it was Thomas. There's one kid that just bounces out on the family. So he does get the title of gentleman on town record. So all of this is on town record. If you go through and you're looking at Topsfield and Boxford history, you will find these people. If you go and look, like I did, at their internet archives, it really wasn't that hard. All right. So it's on the town records. Then, of course, he has his own marriage. He goes forth and marries a prominent lady. So he's a servant. He just pops out of obscurity marrying this Mary French. Okay. Miss Mary is a Plantagenet. And a Plantagenet, again, is coming into this story. I just find that a little fascinating. And I was trying to figure out if Joan set those two up, because it seems a little too easy. Yeah, she's Plantagenet through marriage and her children. And the next thing we know, he's marrying one. So I just think that most likely that was probably set up, but I can't prove that. That's not on town record. So it is their marriage, but not how they met. And so her mother was Mary Scudamore, Scudamore. And she was born in Herefordshire, and she married a guy named Ensign Thomas French. So for those of you that have been Mormon or are Mormon, which I hope you can watch my channel, I try really hard right now to just go down the legacy of the history of the church. And it is going to get messy. It's already a little bit witchy messy, and we're going to get worse on the witchiness. But I still don't think it's worth what they did, because Captain Samuel Smith, he becomes a captain later down the road. He's the second Samuel. He's really cool. And my next one was supposed to be this one, but then I veered off the other path, and we ended up going here because this was such a weird story about the witch and the Ipswich and all that stuff. So it plays in, because for those of you that saw on Gallows Hill, my show, there's witchcraft. So, and the Goulds, and they intermarry. it becomes a thing. So I just wish the church would just say, yeah, it was a thing. What can you do about it? Come on now. Let's be real here. Just be honest. Stop that. So Ensign Thomas French, okay, their lineage to Sir William Scudamore through her is a knight and a prominent knight and the high sheriff, okay, back in the day. And Mary Throckmorton was his wife, and she's part of the Tudor courts. And so this whole thing where they're like, they were poor farmers and they didn't know how to read. hmm Listen, this Robert of Boxford read well enough as a little indentured servant to go and become Robert of Boxford because he incorporated the town through the legal pathway. He's underneath this chick that, as far as I can see, Miss Joan Tuttle knew her shit and she was all about that. And, you know, quite the liberated woman for back then. And they literally said she was an excellent attorney. She was her own attorney. So they couldn't give her that title, but that's what she was. And so, anyway, back to Mary. Mary's Plantagenet family, there's no way if he was of low standing that he could have done this. No. She was still seen as a very important person, okay? Ensign Thomas French was a tailor. Go figure. I wonder where they met, right? Tailor. Go figure. And military officer, sergeant. He was blocked, apparently, by Governor Winthrop. And the Winthrops are so important, and we're going to talk about them next time. But Winthrop liked kind of keeping his thumb on this ensign. And it's kind of sad because he blocked him from getting like his promotion, and they had to like go forward. And there's all these letters about it and trying to get them, okay, and have it pushed through. And so, there's letters and all this stuff preserved in especially Joan Tuttle's letters to John. So you guys can find that in those court documents like I did. It really wasn't that hard on the Internet Archives. So anyway, Winthrops originally also for this French family, okay, not French, but that was their last name, Ensign French. His sisters were indentured servants to this Winthrop guy, and their names were Dorcas. I hope they didn't reuse that one in the temple. That one was rough. Dorcas and Susan, okay? And until they were paid off, they basically were owned by this Winthrop. And who was he, right? Well, John Winthrop is a big deal. He was the top of the top of the top, okay, for the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And his son, does his son get interesting? Way interesting. So we're going to get there. Okay. So yeah, it just becomes something that you see it and you're like, wait, what? The Winthrops, and how do they play into all this? And how do they get to alchemy? How do they get to witchcraft? And how do they get to all of this? Because they do. So yeah, it's just, I wished it wasn't so juicy, but it totally is. Like, there's nothing I can do about that fact. So long story short, like I said, through the Winthrops, they kind of had their thumb, they were held down, but they did fight for their rights and they did get it. But the weirdest part, these merchants, tailors, drapers, all these people, right? They cross paths with the iron workers often. Why? Because who's making the rods for the curtains? I mean, these are royal court type people, right? And once again, Thomas French, father of Ensign French, was an official liveryman. Okay, not delivery, livery. Within the exact time frame and network as Ronald D., John D's father. And so, like I said, they were in these guilds, they were in these like brotherhoods, they had to know secret handshakes and all this stuff, right? But even more wild, as if that wasn't like kind of crazy enough, right? This part was kind of interesting because we get into the Gallows Hill again, where I knew I had read the story, and it's at josephsmithsenior.org, okay, where Mary Eastie had fed Samuel Smith a bad piece of meat, and I could not find it anywhere. I couldn't find where the heck I read it, but I knew I had. I read so many books, and I just couldn't remember. So eventually, I found it again on josephsmithsenior.com, and it literally states that that Mary Easty, one of the most famous, she petitioned for the spectral evidence to stop in the Salem witchcraft trials, which I mean, it needed to stop because how she was convicted was Samuel Smith got shoved when he wasn't even at her house. He was just on a way home and he got scared, and basically that was all. And so that killed her. And she knew she was going to die. But instead of just letting herself, die and nothing else be said, she used to be a town. This Mary Easty was a town. And the towns play heavily into this whole, the Goulds, the towns. When you go back to Salem witchcraft trials, the Smiths are 100% a huge piece of it. Like, there's just no other way around it. And I think that's maybe why they cut this out, but that's stupid. They even document that, Joseph went back to Salem at some point and he stayed with Uncle Jesse there and da 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 da. Da. And they always want to talk about New York, but really, this family, at least paternally, is very prominent in Massachusetts, way more than New York ever even thought about. Am I right? So this is the wild piece. I'd read that story. And I knew about the story, that he gave spectral evidence that she came after him or whatever. It's his aunt. What the hell? Yeah, it's his aunt by marriage. Okay. And this, Kenneth Mays, Mormon Times, 5/27, 2010, or josephsmithsenior.com. You will find that information there. So I'm just like, what? Okay, that's wild. Now remember, they're supposed to be poor farmers, and that's not exactly what this whole. We've got Robert of Boxford now. That sounds very fancy, married to Mary French, and they're very successful. His oldest son, I believe it is his oldest, Thomas, was kind of a dick. I guess he took off early on and he wanted to go with the grandpa, and he just was like, peace out as soon as he could. And he became an inholder of Ipswich, very successful and lucrative. The next one, Jacob, they had twins, Nathan and Jacob. Now, this one is sad, and I don't know exactly what happened here, but apparently Nathan was a cripple, is what they called him. They didn't call him insane or they would call insane people something else. Oh, I can't remember the name. But yeah, it wasn't like a committed situation. He was physically handicapped. And twins a lot of times will suffer from cerebral palsy and different things, especially with birth trauma. So I don't know. I don't know if it's hereditary. I don't know if it was, whatever, but he needed to be cared for the rest of his life. And so he ends up giving he splits his land up in his will, and one of the brothers is like, nah, I think it's Jacob. He's like, I don't need it, because I'm gonna marry me Rebecca Simons, and her grandfather was the deputy governor for the entire Massachusetts Bay Colony per Clark University. What? Like, this does not sound like poor farmers that have nothing. And actually, if you go look at the house and stuff, and I've had pictures before, and I think it is on Gallows Hill, they had a lot. He died with 300 acres of land, a home, like nice stuff, like draperies, like shoes with buckles, which were silver. Like, that just didn't happen. Okay. We're not talking about poor indentured servant-y stuff. No, no, I'm not buying it. Okay. And anyway, so that one, he didn't want it. And Samuel Smith the first inherited all the rest of the lands. Okay. And that's fine. He marries Rebecca Curtis, who came from John Curtis, a corporal and a sergeant, as well as a selectman and a constable for Topsfield. No freaking wonder that Samuel Smith the first, Samuel Smith the second, Azael, they all become selectmen, all of them. And they're all hugely important in all of these wars, just FYI. Not only on his side, but the Mac side. And believe me, we will be getting to the Macs. They are a crazy treasure trove, and not at all what I expected at all. So honestly, they always make it out like Joseph was the one that was kind of looked at as like, oh, he's white trash or whatever, and you can't marry my daughter. I'm not saying the Macs were white trash. I'm just saying they were running and gunning. They were running it. If they knew the Bronfmans, they would have been besties. I'm going to tell you that right now. So there's that. Yeah. And I will get a teleprompter eventually because, yeah, I know it's annoying with all my papers, like, making noise and whatever, but I just can't do anything about it. But this stuff was I found it very, very fascinating. They in total had 10 children, okay? And they also had a kid named Ephraim. And Ephraim, this is important. You guys need to remember this part for the next part, okay? Because I'm going to keep these about an hour long and we're at 45. So I'm going to be moving forward here on the next part, hopefully a little quicker. Like if I can't get these out, it's because I can't get in. It's not because I don't want to. It's been a situation. So anyway, he ends up very interested in metallurgy, mining, and alchemy. You don't say. You don't say. Well, I wonder if he knows. I know he does. The governor's son. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. So, that's just a little quick and dirty of all of the things that I kind of found about these Frenches and the Scudamores, which is French, her previous people, and the Smiths in general. It's fascinating. Another book that I used. I just want to give you guys my sources for this. Royal Ancestry: A Study in Colonial and Medieval Families by Douglas Richardson. Okay, that's where I found all of Mary French's information about her being a Plantagenet, a well-documented one at that. The Scudamores, the Tudor connection, and all of that. So Sir William Scudamore, Thomas French, Ensign French, and Mary French. Those are the people you'll need to look up for that. So Mary Easty, very interesting, like I said. The Winthrops, fun facts. If you're from back east and you know the Salem story well, all of these things are ringing bells for you, like 110%. The Tuttles, yeah. And as far as the Tuttles, her story was kind of sad at the end. Her book, the book about the Tuttles and the Internet Archives, were, again, historical notices of Old Belfast, 9-4 of 16. You'll find that, and also court documents, and her letters to her husband, John, are well preserved in Internet Archives. So there is also the best book as far as what I say, New England Heritage is a really good one by Anderson. This is the book. That's a really good one for his family, Richard Lloyd Anderson. A History of Joseph Smith by his mother. This is the book that Brigham Young wanted to have burned and never come out. Written by his mother. And The Refiner's Fire, this one is great. And this one is by Brooke. And this talks a lot about the Gnostic situation and the alchemical experiments. And this one's honestly fascinating. So, these families are going to intertwine into Salem. These families are going to intertwine into New Haven. These families are important. They are not nobodies. That's a lie. That's an absolute lie. The minutes of the town of Topsfield, Pierre Plantard and Philippe de Cherisay was another one on my sources. And Following the Ark of the Covenant and the Gold of Carthage by Carrie Ross and Lisa Lee Boren. He's got a crazy backstory. He's in prison. They do this to people. I think he might have died, but he was in prison. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that, but that's one of them. Very little used from that source because, I didn't know what to do with that. That story's crazy. It reminds me very much of Fritz Springmeier. I think anytime you start saying all the things, obviously they come for you, but mine wasn't exactly who I thought would. Anyway, once again, I think this is a fascinating overview of the Smith family. I think it was very worthwhile to go down this whole road. And I know we're gonna touch in and out on different ways to present because we're gonna end up back at the Mayflower eventually. But I wanted to do his family line separate from that. So, and Captain Samuel Smith is next. His father, again, it's easy to remember Samuel Smith the first. He was born in 1666. And if you've ever seen Robert Seffer's book, you just laughed a little. But yeah, that one, and then the next. And so we'll go from there. Like I said, the main for Samuel Smith the first is he was the witchcraft guy. I mean, I don't know what else to say. He gave definite testimony against his aunt, Mary Eastie, and she died because of it. Funny enough, on the same day Joseph Smith would find those plates over 100, I think it was 100 and something years later. And so September 22nd. So it was on the night and it was transferring because it was after midnight. So I just found that also fascinating. Fun fact. Just not, I mean, it's coincidental, right? Right. Oh, okay. Anyways, he does go on, and eventually, once again, we get into the Plantagenets when we get to Lucy. He never let that go, did he? He's got these people that are marrying it seems like every Smith boy just finds him a Plantagenet girl. I don't know if they all did, but surely Robert Smith did. He definitely did as well. So, Lucy Mack Smith was directly related through Edward Longshanks. So just so you guys remember that. The Hartford court records is where a lot of the information about the Tuttle's troubles are. Okay, so that's the other place you guys want to check if you want to look into my sources, which is great. I think you should. Anytime we present things, we have to be at the mercy of what we're presented with. They lie to us about every single thing. So of course it's going to be hard, not just they as in the church, like everything, all of history is a lie. So it's written by the winners. We already know this. And, we're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff. But as for me, that is a wrap on the paternal side of the Smiths. I found it, like I said, pretty fascinating. And if, you want to say, no, that's the wrong Robert Smith, you might want to do your homework and go look at those court records, because I surely did. As for me, that is it for today. I am happy, as always, to be back with you guys. Have no idea how happy I am to be able to talk to you guys about this stuff, because otherwise it's just me talking to myself. I am talking to myself anyway, but at least it gets out there, and hopefully production will get back to where I can do interviews and whatever. But as for now, here I am, locked in my basement. So I hope you guys like it. Let me know in the comments. We're going to get into the Revolutionary War next time. We're going to get into metallurgy, alchemy, and some gun running and gunning. So that's it for me. Much love. Bye.